Oh, whoa. Got to take that off. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be around the world. Welcome to episode 11. Of course, I am Jay Campbell, and to my bottom below me or to your left is, of course, Laura Knight-Jadczyk, and of course, my business partner and friend, Hunter Williams, and Harrison Koehli. Harrison, what's going on, my brother? How are you doing today?
Hey, good.
Good to have you. Laura, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm still alive and sitting up and taking nourishment.
That's awesome. Hunter, what's going on, my bro? How are you?
Nothing much. Just Sunday afternoon here. That's crazy about Simba. It's really sad. It's with animals, it's always, and for people that don't know what we're talking about, Jay's dog of 16 years just died. And I'm just thinking about like the time I've known Simba and how long he's been around, and it kind of just animals are. I was thinking about our dog this morning. One of our German shepherds is about to be 13, and he's like still running around like he's an 8-year-old. But it just gives you like an insight into like those years of your life, and like how second density kind of like acts like a mirror to you, and it gives you like a lot of reflection. I have learned as much from my pets, like thinking about densities and how they think about things and how we see things. So it's always touching and sad at the same time, but like you said, such is life. So
yeah. So for those that don't know, my dog, who's 16 and a half years old, in dog years, in human years, he's like 94. Literally died at 3 minutes before the show started, and my daughter, who's 15 and pretty mature, handled it well. But I was expecting him. My wife flew out this morning to go back to California to visit with her kids for a couple days, and we kind of knew that he was at the end of his rope. But he did live an amazing, honorable life. He went through Southern California, Mexico, and now South Florida. So shout out to Simba. We'll pour one out for him as we do the show today. But to everybody, I don't know why I can't get this off. There we go. For some reason, it wouldn't come off. There's YouTube for you. For everybody that's here today, we wanted to talk about episode 11. Harrison's written some really amazing, in fact, part 3 came out yesterday, recent articles on the Cassiopaea and Substack about mankind's ancient origins and whether or not we are descendants from quote unquote aliens or hyperdimensional beings, transmogrification. And I think today I really wanted to break down those last 3 articles. We're in obviously very crazy times, as all of you know. I mean, the whole thing with Epstein and Trump and the cover up and God knows what else is going on is just insane. But I'll go to you first, Harrison, because obviously you wrote the last 3 articles. I was ready to dissect the number 2 article because I thought it was so amazing. And then you dropped the Giants article yesterday. And it was just completely blew my mind. But like, what are your thoughts on just the whole idea as man is man a hybridized being?
Well, for a long time, I didn't know what to think about that idea. I mean, I don't even think I considered it really like high on my list of possibilities. I wasn't necessarily always a Darwinist, but I always thought things were more or less, natural, and that the species developed, however, and that new ones come, and that there wasn't necessarily much room for kind of what I kind of saw as a creationist, some intelligence is just going to create a being out of nothing and then just implant it there. Now I'm not so sure. I'm more open to the idea. But there are various different theories. I mean, there are tons of different theories for the origin of life, and some of the more out there ones, well, I would say some of the alternative ones, not necessarily the more out there ones, that would have been more in line with my my way of looking at things, were like, there was a book that a bunch of us read that Laura recommended years ago called like The Fifth Option, and by a guy named Bryant Schiller. And this was kind of a intelligent design kind of book where he was looking at genetics. And by the end of the like long, dense book, he was basically saying that, well, we might be genetically engineered. There might be some kind of
actual like intelligent genetic engineering that went into our creation, and that would be evident, or there might be a signal of that, a clue of that in DNA. Basically, that if we look at DNA, if someone cracks the code, so to speak, they might be able to find a signature. So I thought that was pretty cool. But as these articles go into and in some depth, there has always been the idea that humanity was created by something else. What that means is hard to say. Like, what does it actually mean to say we were created? Does that mean like something like what Zecharia Sitchin thought, that there were these Anunnaki beings that essentially genetically engineered us in physical laboratories, and then I don't know, implanted some embryos into ape bodies or something, and created life that way? Was it more of a process that would look natural to us, but that had some kind of like supernatural origin to it? All possibilities, but in the ancient myths, you often just find that creation was the result of gods doing some kind of tinkering. Whether we interpret that nowadays as some kind of like genetic engineering, or if we just look at the old texts, it's, the way they present it, a lot of them, is there was some kind of interbreeding between two different types of being, and that created humanity. Of course, you also get myths like that we were created out of dust, or out of the earth or something like that. So there are all kinds of theories, but and all kinds of myths. But these articles kind of look at, or take those myths, put them in the context of what the Cassiopeans have said, and basically present the idea that something was going on, and that we weren't entirely the result of a natural process. At the very least, there was some tinkering going on, and ultimately humanity, let's say, a certain definition of humanity might have an origin that's completely, off planet and weird. And that might be the origin of all life. All life everywhere in the universe, like, might have different origin points, and life on Earth might have its source elsewhere. So we can get down into specifics, but those are just kind of my broad thoughts on the topic.
Laura, I'm going to go to you. Again, if you read all three articles, and I'm going to link after I let Laura speak here to the Cassiopean Substack. If you're not subscribed to it, you should be. Some of the best stuff going. Laura's Substack is also amazing. She's constantly asking Grok to do an analysis, comparative analysis of things. Yesterday was pretty good too. But what are your thoughts? I know, obviously you and I have spoken about this, and you've been very clear in your books that, way back when, you never wanted to entertain the hypothesis of UFOs and aliens and, any of this. And that, then you started reading and researching, and all this stuff just came, to you, as you did your deep dive. But like, where are you now? Obviously understanding what the C's have said, all the experiments that you guys have done, like, and how would you liken it to the whole situation with Epstein? I had to pull this on you, in that it just all went away now, right? Like, there's been all these accusations of him being involved in cloning and just craziness and stuff like that. But like, is there something that connects the dots here with Epstein?
Something with ancient aliens that connects?
Yes.
I don't know if you read my little Grok piece from yesterday about Epstein. That was kind of funny, because Grok, once I had given it the parameters, you can't be calling into him now, because gave it the parameters. It pretty quickly said that obviously Epstein was targeted while he was in school to be taken into some kind of program, some kind of something with the intelligence agencies. And I thought that that was a pretty interesting observation for Grok to make. And if you want to, think about that in terms of, somebody who's been hybridized or,
Mhm.
I mean, Epstein was to my way of thinking, kind of a peculiar looking guy. He had this really long horse face.
Yeah.
And the kinds of things that he clearly was into kind of remove any sense of humanity from him. Kind of, and Grok even pointed that out, that, the kind of people who do the kinds of things that he was doing, were obviously psychopaths. I mean, Grok got all the buzzwords in there. But if he was some kind of a hybrid, but the thing about that, it's like the thing about psychopaths.
Right.
That's something you can't really know unless you make long and careful observations, or there's some kind of evidence presented to you. So, it's not really useful to make those kind of declarations. Well, first of all, people who are new to the ideas that are being presented would be completely turned off.
Right.
And second of all, you can't really know. And so I hesitate to say those kinds of things. It's like people who claim to see shapeshifters. There was apparently some woman, one of Epstein's victims, I think it was. You sent me a link.
Yeah, Juliet Lewis. Yeah.
Who said that she saw him shapeshifting. And I have a lot of problems with that, for two or three reasons, one of which the whole shape-shifting phenomenon is very popular among a certain group of people. There's a lot of actual literature about it. And I mean, look at the TV shows about vampires or shapeshifters or werewolves, that sort of thing. So it's kind of like a popular trope. And the other reason is that, my understanding from what the Caesar said is that shapeshifting is something that takes place in a hyperdimensional environment, not necessarily a third density environment. Now, that's not to say that people do not get taken into hyperdimensional environments, because supposedly when people are abducted by so-called aliens, and I say so-called because, they're more likely to be ultra-terrestrials than actual, aliens as we commonly would think of it. So if people get abducted and taken to hyperdimensional space, in some kind of time lock, and they are there with beings that can shapeshift, and maybe they do shapeshift, then, it's certainly theoretically possible. It's also possible that they could be under the influence of drugs, and they think that that's what they're seeing. Because, I mean, if you've read any accounts of people experiencing psychedelic drugs, they certainly see shape-shifting going on. And for all we know, this poor girl was introduced to a little LSD or something like that, and really believes that what she saw was reality. So as far as linking Epstein to any kind of aliens, anything is possible, and especially in this day and time when we see this continuous drive to basically decimate the population of the planet. And you think about it, and you think about, well, that's not even a rational course of action for the elites, so to speak. I mean, they're just, if they want to be in charge, how are they going to be in charge if everybody's gone? There's not going to be anybody to be in charge of. And if they turn everything over to AI and get rid of the people, then, who are they going to lord it over? And if they're making these preparations because they think there's going to be some kind of earth changes, some kind of cosmic interaction. Do they actually think they're going to survive? I mean, none of it makes any rational sense, except that they've been given marching orders to decimate the planet.
That's what I was just going to say. And I wanted to say this to all of you guys, if you remember, and this haunts me to this day. I remember watching, and I don't, and again, I apologize to the audience. I don't remember if this was on HBO or if this was on Netflix, but do you guys remember when they actually did a documentary and interviewed Epstein? It was back in like 2018, 17, maybe even 2016. But I remember watching those episodes. And I'm telling you guys, all of you listeners and everyone on the show, that something wasn't right about him. Yes, he's a psychopath. And, we understand the ponerology and all that. But there was something else about him. Like if you asked me when I was watching that back then, and I wasn't as aware of the hyperdimensional nature of reality as I am now then, but I would have told you that he was a demon, that he was inhabited by something, because he would literally look at the camera. I highly urge all of you guys to go back and watch some of the episodes from his documentary before he was, this is when he was incarcerated, before he was sentenced. And he was just like, you can't do anything. You can't do anything to me. And it was just that was the error that he had in the entire, interview series. And again, I don't remember if it was on Netflix or HBO. I think it was on HBO, but it was the most insane stuff that I've ever seen in my life. And I just would walk away from that thinking, like, who is this person? He can't be a person.
Do you have a link to that, or can you find a link?
I'll find it. I know that there was a documentary about him, and he was interviewed, and he was on camera many, many times, and he would just look at the camera and just be like, you can't do anything to me. Do you know who I am? It was literally one of those the whole time. It was incredible, mind-blowing stuff. But so that's the point, is who was he? What is he?
I've got a possible angle on that, but first, there's a little bit of an audio issue. Can you guys hear it? There's a little bit of squeak echo coming from someone's mic. I'm not sure whose that is.
I'm going to take my mic off and talk and see if it's mine.
All right. Oh, how about Jay, you say something.
Hello.
What about me?
I think it's still there. I didn't hear it when you were talking, Laura, so I think it might be your mic that's picking up us from.
It might be Laura's mic that's getting feedback, because StreamYard does.
Yeah, I hear that now. It
switches.
I'm not even using a separate mic. I'm just using the camera mic.
Yeah,
it could just be them playing with us.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Is it still doing it?
I was laughing.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear it now? Is it still doing it?
It's still there.
It's still doing it.
Heck.
We could try muting ourselves when we're not talking, but
yeah.
How do you do it? There you go.
hit the microphone. Okay.
Is it doing?
Yeah, I think it was Laura's.
Now?
I think it was Laura's mic.
Laura,
we'll just make sure that you unmute unmute yourself when you start talking.
Yeah, Laura, if you can see at the bottom of the screen, like there's a microphone and then a video. If you click that microphone, just make sure it's the right microphone, because sometimes it switches on you and it will try to use the speaker as the microphone or something like that.
It's a microphone Logitech StreamCam. So that's what I'm.
Is there any other options for it on there if you have the drop down?
I don't see. Wait a minute. There was an option for audio. Microphone Logitech StreamCam.
And then what's the audio next to it? Does it have something there on the right to that?
Echo cancellation. Reduce mic background noise. Let me
try that.
Okay, now how is it?
That's better. You're quieter, but there's no echo.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
no, there's echo.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay.
I'd say just go back to where you were.
Okay. How about stereo audio? I guess I can't. That's not an option for me.
Hello?
Well, okay. So you want me to turn off when I'm not talking?
Actually, you sound better now. I don't hear any echo. Do you?
That is
You
better.
There's still some chirping. Yeah, but I think it might be better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway.
Go ahead, Harrison.
Okay. Well, this will get into something in the articles. So, well, this will go back first to the series on undergrounders, and there was a section in there, and it's in the, I don't know if it's online, but I included more in the book, and there's more in the book on Pat Price's remote viewing from like the late 70s, where he was talking about underground bases and the people in these bases.
Right.
And only recently, in the last couple of years, Skip Atwater, I think he published. Well, it wasn't even him, but the full notes that Pat Price made have been published online, so you can look at his actual notes. And he actually created a list of all the people that he remote viewed as being either undergrounders or under the control of undergrounders, and he listed several categories of people, including like top, influential physicists. People with, and in there he included like some of the categories were people that worked like scientists and researchers who had like Rockefeller grants and were like interconnected in the field, in various fields. But he also listed, people involved in various social issues, at the head of like women's liberation or et cetera, a bunch of different fields of activism and science and politics and influential like political advisors. And he actually included a list of positions, like the current head of the UN whatever, and the scientific advisor to the Russian premier, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He didn't list any names, but he gave the positions. So I went through that list and just found as many of those people as I could find. Like, oh well, who was this person at that time? So I included those people in the book. They're pretty much all dead now, but or not in that position. And so that was interesting. And then these are just a bunch of connections. There's no proof for any of this. This is just like a bunch of points that may or may not be able to be connected. But in these articles, there's a section in the last article on giants on the Smithsonian cover-up, and how they were kind of instrumental in covering up the giants in America. How prior to the Smithsonian getting involved, there were hundreds of reports in newspapers from like credentialed archaeologists of the time and just regular citizens, like people who might be building a bridge or something and dynamiting, and then they find a giant skeleton, or actual archaeologists doing digs, and they would publish their just small reports in either the newspapers or the actual scientific journals of the time, including the Smithsonian's own annual reports. And then along comes this guy, I think his name was Ales Hrdlicka, and he was like the head of the anthropology division or something. He became head. And right around that time, there was like a sea change, and he had very strong beliefs about the origin of the natives. And he thought they were, I think, only 3,000 years old or something like that. And been in the Americas for that long. So he was totally anti anything that would show a human presence before a certain time. And from then on, the Smithsonian has denied the existence of giant skeletons, until today, when some people have asked representatives of the Smithsonian for some information on all these giant bones that they have. And they'll say, oh, we have no giant bones. We don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing cataloged. The tallest person that we have record of that we've had skeleton, it was like 6'3" or something.
Yeah.
Total denial, even though in their own reports, they report either receiving these giants or actual, acknowledging that they existed at the time. And not to mention the dozens and dozens, maybe even reaching up to the hundreds, I'm not sure, of reports in newspapers where these archaeologists and locals that find these giants say, oh, we gave it to the Smithsonian bought it from us, We shipped it to the Smithsonian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By various means, the Smithsonian got all these giant bones, and now there's no record of them. Even to say that, oh yeah, we received the bones, and this is where they were, but it was turned out that they were a hoax. They don't even go that far to try to cover it up. They just say, oh, no record, like these things never existed, even though we know they exist. So this guy, Ales Hrdlicka, he was, a prominent scientist, put into a position of authority, an influential position, and altered the understanding of human history to such a degree that it, blocked out a certain part of what we would call reality. So an interesting trend, or an interesting example of what might be a trend. Now, flash forward to Jeffrey Epstein and certain people like him. Epstein, one of his apparent greatest interests was science. Yeah. He was friends with some of the world's top scientists. Like I'm pretty sure Stephen Hawking. And one of his particular interests, I haven't looked into this in depth lately, but I just saw a tweet. I think Jesse Michaels and Jay Anderson did a little conversation about Jeffrey Epstein, where they comment on how he was very interested, apparently, in gravity. So he was in tight with a bunch of the top scientists researching gravity. And so I'll just say it's odd to have a person like Epstein in tight and with kind of the big movers and shakers of the scientific industry and field. And so I'd have some questions about that. I would like someone to kind of take that aspect and run with it, to look at all the scientific connections he had, like who he was funding, because he funded a ton of scientists. There are a ton of scientists that, well, I think there was one or two like prominent ones that basically had their reputations ruined after it came out that they were close with Epstein. It's possible that I'd say it's even probable that most of these scientists were like innocent of any of the the things that was going on with a lot of Epstein's associates. That this was probably another operation of his. Maybe there was some blackmail involved, but to have this prominent Intel connected guy, this node between all of these networks of science in important fields, important branches of science, that just strikes me as curious, and just kind of reminded me of not necessarily Hrdlicka, but that kind of maybe moving in that kind of direction, maybe having a similar kind of motivation in getting an idea of what the trends are, and maybe even directing them in a certain way, and funding certain things, not funding other things. Maybe bringing some scientists into the kind of like deep black top secret world, either to cover up, maybe to cover up certain things, maybe to steer certain things. Who knows? But I just thought I'd bring that up.
So Laura, I just posted a link to the Netflix series. It was in 2019 and 2020. It was called Filthy Rich, and it is on Netflix. So I just posted a link. I'll send you an email with it too, but it's on Netflix. It's worth watching because it's fascinating to watch this person as he's interviewed in the entire series. I'm telling you, every time I watched it, I would literally get the heebie-jeebies. I'm like, what is going on? This is insane. It was almost like it was a ritual that they were posting it, to the world. And we all know that Obama, and his minions funded Netflix. It's not like we don't know that Netflix doesn't put out all sorts of demonic sorcery, black magic type stuff. I mean, it seems like every show these days has demons in it, but it was a very bizarre show when it was on and how it was portrayed to the American people. But, again, I don't want to make this whole show about Epstein. I want to talk about, the articles that you wrote, but it is really weird, Laura, when you look at how Epstein rose to quote unquote prominence, where like Lex Wexner gave him his $2 billion, his riches to manage. And he had no background in finance. He didn't even have a degree, a college degree. I mean, it's just really weird stuff. So I guess my question would be, do you guys think he was an undergrounder bred for this?
I think it's highly possible.
Yeah.
My question, well,
all people, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so, out of all the conspiracy stuff, I think of Epstein. It's such a labyrinth if you try to figure out just the bizarre nature of the connections with people, what has gone on since his death. And I wonder, so we know fourth density operates, we know third density operates. So just because someone behaves bad in third density doesn't necessarily mean that they're inhabited or they're an undergrounder. However, you look at people like Epstein, you look at the bizarre nature of what they do, kind of these weird rise to power, and you look at a lot of the seized transcripts of some of these people that are undergrounders that are influencing culture, politics, religion on the surface. I just wonder how many degrees of separation between fourth density STS to third density is Epstein, because he was obviously a man that was walking around. Was he an undergrounder, or were there people controlling him? Because there's obviously some nefarious stuff going on there. And I always just wonder, how close is it to hyperdimensional shenanigans that Jeffrey Epstein was? Was he one of them, or was he just a person that was operating, that there was like people along the chain of command? I don't know, but it's just fascinating to think about. I know we'll probably never have an answer to that. So,
well, you're talking about him in past tense. I don't think he's dead. I think Joe and saw proved through the editing of the film, the cheap, rudimentary editing of the video from the prison cell or the jail cell or whatever, that it was stitched together and edited. So it's like, I'm sure the guy's not even dead.
He did seem to be, obviously he made some mistakes because he came to the attention of law enforcement in South Florida.
Right.
He did end up, getting charged, and he did end up with some kind of a sentence. So even though he had this super nice plea deal that got him off with actually practically nothing.
Right.
Because what he was doing was so egregious and there were so many victims. And you balance the egregiousness and the victims against this ridiculous plea deal. And you just have to think that there were just an enormous number of people who were protecting him.
Right.
And you think they're protecting him because they're being blackmailed, or because he's such a fantastic asset for some other reason. And if he is, and you look at his background, and he skipped grades in school,
Right.
Was supposedly so smart, and he just kind of like appeared out of nowhere. They've got a birth date for him and everything. And then he got this posh job when he was just 20 years old with no education.
Right. Nothing.
Teaching mathematics at a kind of a preppy type school. And then apparently he behaved egregiously there and got tossed out. He's got the pattern of the classic psychopath, except for, psychopaths aren't normally really that smart. Some people tend to say, oh, well, they're very smart. And I think most of that is because they're able to, pull the wool over people's eyes.
Right. Yeah.
Because if they were really that smart, just their sheer brain power would be something to keep them out of trouble. And he just didn't seem to be able to keep himself out of trouble. And, and like you, I have strong doubts about him being dead at all.
Yeah.
But then if he's not, if he's in some kind of protection program, or had plastic surgery, living in retirement somewhere, I can't help but think that he would screw that up too, because it's like he has screwed up everything he's done eventually, and bringing himself to the attention of authorities. So yeah, that's
or he is an undergrounder and he's back there.
Yeah, maybe they took him back underground if he was an undergrounder, or contained him in some way. But I can't imagine that if he had some kind of dead man switch with blackmail that would force them to take care of him and not assassinate him, that he would, tolerate or put up with that. So it's pretty mysterious. But yeah, his early history could speak to either some individual who was identified by whatever process they use to be pulled out, to be turned into an intelligence asset, or it's the same pattern. It could be that he was an undergrounder and this was his path into the world.
Yeah, that's what I think. Again, just based on my watching that documentary and watching his persona and how he just everything you just said, and you said also, all of you guys have said is true. He just had this like air of invincibility about him. It was like, there's nothing you can do. I'm going to keep going. I mean, I'm telling you, like, I didn't know what an undergrounder was then. Now that I do, like, that's Occam's razor to me. That's what he is. He is a being that doesn't consider himself to be human. He considers himself above us. And he just had that, again, that era of invincibility about him. But then I have to ask you guys the question, and I know that we're getting off topic, but I think it bears the question. And I read something today on Twitter. Thank God we have X, because what would we all do if we didn't have X? But I read something today on Twitter about Ivana Trump and her relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. At this point, knowing what Trump just did in the last, 10 days, now he's like saying, like, why are we talking about it? I mean, it's insane, the things that have come out of his mouth. Is he or is he not involved in this?
That's your question?
That's my question.
My suspicion is that there is something really horrible or distasteful or horribly distasteful or heinously horrible that Trump now knows about the whole Epstein situation, that makes him understand that all of this information cannot be released.
Right.
He's perfectly willing to let the grand jury testimony be released, but that's not the data from, say, Intel files that they might have on him. That's just what, people were saying about him, their experiences and so forth. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, is it because it's Israel? I'm not even sure if that would stop Trump. I think it might be something else. And I think at a certain point in time, maybe somebody went and had a chat with Trump and said, here's some facts, some data, you need to think about this. And I think it may have something to do with the nature of our reality. It may have something to do with something that's being planned for the future, or maybe they just, were blowing smoke for Trump in a way that they knew that would psychologically influence him. Because, I mean, come on, they got psychological profiles on people, and Trump is undoubtedly no exception, and they would know how to maneuver and manipulate him. So what he's doing is it's just incomprehensible.
That's a good word. Astonishing, insane.
I do wonder that sometimes, Laura, when we get seemingly on the brink of big revelations, and then they seem to just fade off into the night. Does that have to do, maybe not with Epstein, maybe not with Trump, but a facet of reality being revealed to the point of too many people? Like, if a critical mass of people had that information, would it reveal too much to where, I don't know, I wonder sometimes, like, if people understood even what we understand about densities, does that change the nature of the course of the future because people understand those things? And I wonder, through those things, like through documents like that being revealed, maybe it's not even about Epstein, maybe it is, but is it something about a facet of reality that would be too much for people to be able to handle? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that occurs to me a lot, and considering the kind of energy that's been exerted to block, suppress, marginalize, and defame, the whole Cassiopean experiment and its, primary thesis that, we are controlled by beings that denizens of hyperdimensional realities, that we are an experiment, that we are, created beings, or at least genetically manipulated beings. And, they definitely don't want that to achieve any kind of widespread acceptance. So maybe some of the things that stop people from pursuing things like the Epstein files or whatever are, things that have to do with that. That seems to be like the biggest secret. It's like the most dangerous idea in the world. I've called it that. So somebody here says that Trump's name is being scrubbed from all of the files by the FBI. Well, I don't believe that, because if Trump's name was in those files, believe me, the Democrats would have been mentioning it.
I actually think, to what all of you are saying, to go back to what Hunter was saying, if we believe the C's, and all of us believe the C's, they're saying they're going back and forth, altering the timestamp. They're altering reality, and they've been going back and forth 75,000 years forward and backwards. Again, outside of third density, time doesn't exist. We all know that. So it's like, what if this is one giant hyperdimensional honeypot, and the timeline is being altered as we speak, and that all sorts of craziness has happened in just the last 8 months since Trump was elected? And a lot of this stuff is just literally very, not finite. It's very, very up in the air, and things are just being changed as we go. I mean, that's kind of where I'm leaning.
It started to look that way. I mean, it's almost like we live in a combination of a Truman Show and Groundhog Day.
Right.
I mean, if you can imagine the two ideas amalgamated.
Right.
And then all of a sudden something comes in and starts messing things up. It's we're in very unstable times, and there's a lot of chaos, and chaos is one of the things that happens when a lot of people are believing lies and so forth. So, yeah.
Well, this is something that just a fun scenario that I think about every once in a while. So a couple months ago, this guy Matthew Brown came forward via Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. So he's the guy that was working in the Pentagon, I think DIA. I'm not entirely sure, but he was basically working in the Pentagon, and he came across the Immaculate Constellation document, which was an unacknowledged special access program, White House special access program, a document where it shouldn't have been. And that kind of started him on basically researching all of the UFO stuff available on the CIPRNet, or whatever the classified file system is in the US government. And so he came forward with a lot of his thoughts on weaponized, and he's tweeted like once or twice. And one of his tweets was this cryptic message to Elon Musk, where he was hinting at a few things. One of which was, he said, Elon, by now you know that the White House has like a super advanced AI prediction program, where they'll throw in a scenario, allegedly, like this is extrapolation, throw in a scenario into this super advanced AI predictor, and it will essentially predict the future for them. Now, so I'm thinking, and then just on top of that, someone asked, I think it might have been Matt Laszlo, the congressional reporter, who asked one of the senators, I think, did you hear about this advanced predictive AI that the White House has? And the senator said something like, "Oh, well, that wouldn't be something I can talk about," or something like that. So he kind of like acknowledged that such a thing might actually exist, but in a pretty reasonable way. I always like when they give answers like that, as opposed to just flat out denying it. So assuming that something like that exists, then I can imagine a scenario where, Trump and team are, whenever something like this comes up, throwing in this scenario into the model and saying, oh, is this a good idea? And if the model says this is a bad idea because this is going to happen, then they might not want to do it. Now, of course, this gets into the question of well, first of all, if this is going on, but second, is the model accurate? Like, can an AI lie? Can an AI be hacked? But also, like, let's say that you could do that. Let's just say hypothetically we had Grok had this prediction capability, and people just started like throwing in everything in there, like a kind of like astrology or something. Oh, should I do this? What's going to happen if I do this? And it just throws back, oh, this is going to happen. Now, if it's consistently for certain scenarios giving you a catastrophic prediction, you're gonna say, okay, I'm not going to do this. Now, even if that's accurate, that still might be the right decision, because that's just the way the world works. Sometimes catastrophes have to happen, and if you put off a catastrophe, you're just you're just inviting an even greater catastrophe after that. The more you put it off, it's like I don't know, being afraid to rip off the Band-Aid. Eventually you're going to have to rip off the Band-Aid, but in this scenario, eventually something worse might happen in the future. So I just wonder if something like that is going on, if for some reason Trump is either being told or he's using AI or whatever, and it's saying, no, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But by consistently putting off the, revealing the hard truth about something, I wonder if that's creating an even bigger catastrophe down the line. And I don't think that people making those kind of decisions really think like that. I think they're thinking more short term, preventing this scandal from creating a big mess right now, but not realizing that it might create an even bigger mess.
Well, to that point, they're already, because you guys all saw this already in the last 2 days, they're already changing the narrative to the Obama, let's prosecute Obama nonsense, right? Tulsi Gabbard is saying, oh, I put it on Pam Bondi's desk and we have to prosecute Obama and Comey and Clapper, blah, blah. I mean, it's all nonsense. But it's like they're doing stuff. Let me just posit this. What if this is just the continual exposure to the normies, the sleepers, the unawakened, whatever you want to call it, of the reality of all of this is just a big circus. And they're just attempting to continue to give, if the realm border crossing is closed, they're attempting to just get as many more people to awaken consciously as possible. And it's just a big canard or a ruse. And they're just constantly like moving the goalposts, like with this, because like I was reading X this morning, and like 80% of people on X, and granted, that's probably not a good echo chamber of the world, but most of the people on X are like, are you serious with this? Like you can see like all of the assets, like Alex Jones and a couple other people are already running with this. This is the greatest thing ever. Unseal the records. Trump is going to arrest Obama. It's like, dude, are you serious? Like, who's paying attention to that when nobody cares? But it's almost like that's kind of what they're doing.
It's transmarginal inhibition. We're just completely
exactly.
And it's getting to the point where when I go on X, I get bored fairly quickly because it's just the same old, it's just same song, different verse, but the same music is playing in the background over and over and over again. And, at a certain point, you just get to the point where you just, you don't want to see it. You don't want to listen to it because it's all BS and it's going to lead nowhere. I'll be surprised if anything definitive happens. Now let's admit this. Every once in a while, something definitive does happen.
Yes.
But not that often.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think we're all open to the idea now that something big is coming. There's so much crazy energy on this planet right now. But Harrison, I want to ask you some questions about the articles real quick, because Hunter and I came up with a bunch of them. One of the questions, and I'm sorry if we lose you on some of this stuff, but one of the questions that Hunter posited, which is awesome, is like, if you think of the exoplanet nature of the Nephilim, and this is obviously what the seas have told us, especially in the last article, how can they exist? And Laura, you can answer this too, but how can they exist in 3D, third density and fourth density at the same time?
Well, so that was in one of the answers. The way the C's put it was like, it's like being abducted. You know, when someone is abducted, they're a third density being in a fourth density environment. So it's kind of like, for whatever reason, like our planet, maybe this applies across the board, but you know, at our level of awareness, 3D and 4D are separated.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have direct access to seeing it. We don't live in that world, but there are either techniques or circumstances in which one can transit from, you know, 3D to 4D. Now, that is kind of strange in the sense that this planet can be conceived of as a 3D planet, a third density planet. And we have animals like flora and fauna that exist within that environment.
Right.
So like we were talking about pets earlier, Jay, like your dog. Dogs and cats, you know, whatever pets you have, they are 2D creatures living in a 3D reality permanently and continually. And you know, they don't have the concepts for it, but that's the reality for them. And so there's something analogous going on where and the same applies for underground bases that are characterized by, you know, having some kind of 4D aspect. Whether I think that part of that might be proximity to 4D technology,
right?
Like you know, there's like on Skinwalker Ranch or something, there's some kind of 4D like base or artifact there that creates a 4D environment in which, you know, humans are living. That's why weird stuff happens, because they're kind of like they're in a semi 4D environment. So when someone gets abducted, they're taken to this other realm, this other, you know, kind of like the upside down
right.
Is that what it's called in Stranger Things? Like they're taken to another realm.
That's
and
coming.
So you're still yourself, and you're that level of awareness, but you're just in a different environment. So the idea is that the Nephilim, you know, the giant enforcers, that's Bigfoot too,
right?
That they are essentially 3D beings that live like semi-permanently in a 4D environment, which would, again, going back to the underground bases and what they've said about that, if they're if constant proximity or just acclimatizing to that enviment causes one to be what they call like a bi-density being, then that might apply too, right? So that it has a what would it called? Some kind of like resonant effect on a person. Like, you know, you hang around a particular environment for long enough and it starts to affect you and maybe, you know, change you on some fundamental level. So that probably applies. So all the people working in these underground bases, you know, they're slowly becoming acclimatized to this environment. And that's probably applies to, you know, any kind of 3D beings like in the employ of hyperdimensional beings like Bigfoot or Nephilim.
Yeah. So a couple of points. First off, that's an amazing analogy of like they were abducted. There's 36, again, according to the Seas mythos, there's 36 million Nephilim floating on a ship, abducted as third density beings and put into fourth density technology and coming back at some point during the wave. But the other thing I was thinking about what you just said, and Laura, you probably remember this stuff going back. The whole idea of clockwork oranging people, you know, all these guys, these elder guys, you know, the Willie Tompkins, and there's so many of them of the world who've talked about working in the special projects, the black budget stuff, you know, the defense contracting, the, you know, Boeing and all these, you know, supposedly hyperdimensional places again, where these bases where these people worked, a lot of these men, it's mostly men, but there's been some women, but they talked about where they would literally go to work in the day and they would get on an elevator and then it would literally be clockwork orange, whatever technology. Think of the Men in Black, right? Look at this. And they go down and they work in a fourth density base. But what if it's really the explanation of being clockwork orange is actually moving or bleeding between third density and fourth density and doing your job in fourth density and then coming back as a third density being and not remembering it? Because as Laura, as you've very clearly laid out in your books, I mean, we can't even comprehend what it's like as a third density being in fourth density.
Well, let me kind of draw a comparison. Many people have given reports of having had paranormal experiences. Harrison mentioned this Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
Now, your ordinary haunting is itself, at a very low level paranormal experience. And many people have reported that when that happens, the room becomes icy. Something is happening, some bleed through is happening, and you're physically experiencing an overlapping of realities. Something similar happens at the Skinwalker Ranch, but it's on a larger and more consistent scale as far as I can tell. The C's have talked about the fact that many events happen because there are bleed-throughs of fourth density into third density during this time of transition, and that there would be like more and more spots where this would be happening. And if you've ever looked at one of those models where they show how the magnetism of the earth changes, where it shows all the crazy lines, and then they do all these crazy things and move around and everything, and then at some point it flips. And I think maybe fourth density coming upon us, or us moving into a region of space that is fourth density, could be something kind of like that. It switches around and it's erratic, and it's things happen, and there's some of it here and there's some of it there. And then of course that it comes with certain activities, say abductions or UFO sightings or Bigfoot or some of these missing 411 incidents, and even the very mild occurrences of hauntings or being in the presence of some kind of spiritual event. So we can't entirely completely separate. I think the veil is thinning. And here I'm not talking about the veil between the living and the dead. That's a completely different veil. Because that's between humans and fifth density, which is something that has nothing to do with fourth density, which is a paraphysical reality. So I think that there's all kinds of things going on, and there are bidensity beings who have been maybe genetically engineered to be bidensity beings.
Sure.
Because if proteins are like antenna, and if the DNA can act as antenna, to anchor you to one frequency or another, and it's like, like the studies they had of like digestion. If you eat a certain food, your body upregulates the genes to produce the chemicals that digest that food. If you change your diet, those genes kind of shut off, and a new set of genes get upregulated to digest this new food substance that you're now consuming. And maybe it's like that genes can be upregulated or downregulated for a person to move from a fourth density reality to a third density reality. And it's like one of those. I had this really horrible insight once years ago, probably 20, 25, 30 years ago. I was at the gym and I was on the treadmill, and I used to meditate on the treadmill because for me, when you get walking on the treadmill, and you close your eyes, because you can walk with your eyes closed on a treadmill. So it's a really great time to meditate, and the physical action is generating this electrical energy. So I really like that, and I was kind of going along, and then all of a sudden I was thinking about DNA and mutations and so forth, some of the things the C's had said, and then and I thought about the fact that the entire lining of your stomach is completely replaced every I think every 24 hours.
24 hours, yeah.
And there are other parts of your body that are replaced at different schedules, but basically your body can do something pretty quick within 8 hours if it can replace the lining of your stomach where there's all that hydrochloric acid. And then it suddenly occurred to me that the ideas of say like werewolves or vampires, or werewolves in specific is what I was thinking about, because they transform, would not necessarily be completely out of the realm of possibility if DNA could be upregulated, right, and cause these transformations. I mean, it wouldn't happen. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't happen within minutes or within a couple of hours. But what do I know? I mean, there may be DNA that instructs it to do it that quickly.
Sure.
So totally shape-shifting is not outside the realm of possibility when you consider it from that point of view. If the DNA is there, if somebody has the DNA to be a shapeshifter, and it gets upregulated for some reason. I was just going to say, triggered by the moon.
Right.
So I had this really horrible thought, but then I thought about it from a more positive angle. And I asked the C's about it in a session, that is it possible that, being exposed to fourth density could cause DNA changes? In other words, could we or would we transform as a result of our exposure to this other, frequency of our environment? And they said, yeah, if the DNA is present. Of course, obviously, it's not present in everybody, but these things can happen, and I suspect that people, very easily can move from the ones that have been genetically engineered to do so, can move from fourth density to third density, and just as a werewolf could be said to be moving from third density to second density.
Right. So that's interesting to think of that.
Well, I wonder too, Laura, especially in your case, people that would have, let's call it like a proclivity to be more psychic, is that actually more of a genetic expression or DNA expression to, I guess, like piercing the veil? Because there's obviously, I would say, like much more women are more psychic than men are. And then also too, I wonder if like the environment can like upregulate genes that would then cause that person to be more psychic or more intuitive, that would then allow them to perceive fourth density more, especially in your case, if you look at your body of work over a lifetime.
Well, I mean, I've asked the C's about that because I have some unpleasant genetic issues. I have a really nasty mutation, but I think maybe the burden that I carry with that mutation, and the C's have suggested as much, there's a benefit, but it's a burden in 3D, so if I was in 4D, I would be a lot more comfortable. So.
Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to find out pretty soon.
Yeah, that would be nice. I would like to be a little more comfortable. My daughter has the same issue. So, in fact, a couple of my daughters have the same issue. And it
talking about piercing the veil, Laura, I don't know if you heard, so this happened like 2 weeks ago, and it was the most bizarre thing. So I recently moved into a new house. So we moved it was like 17 days ago now. And it was right before the 4th of July. So we actually had the moving truck come to our house on the 3rd, and they were closed on the 4th. So like pretty much all of our stuff was on the moving truck until the 5th because they were closed on the 4th. So they just like loaded it up on the 3rd, and then it was on the truck. And so we brought just like our backpacks and our mattress for the day of the 4th because everything was on a moving truck until they moved it on the 5th. And so the first night, no, it was the second night we were in the house. Like the next day, they were going to move our stuff in. So we had our mattress on the living room floor in our new house, and we were just sleeping on the mattress in the living room floor. Didn't really have anything, just like our book bags and phones or whatever. And it was probably around like 11:30 or 12. We had been asleep for like an hour. Both Taylor and I woke up to what sounded like an alarm or a siren going off in the house, almost like a fire alarm. And our dogs were right next to us. And usually with like a sound like that, they'll go nuts because it bothers their ears really bad. And so we heard the siren. And by the time that we woke up and were coherent, it went away. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Maybe it's just a new house. There's an alarm system or something that I don't know about or just hadn't set up yet. And it turned off. And so we were kind of still groggy. And we're like, oh, what was that? I don't know. Maybe it was just the alarm or something. The dogs didn't move or anything. It was almost like they didn't hear it, which is really weird for German Shepherds to hear a sound like that. It bothers their ears really bad. And so anyway, we just went back to sleep or whatever, got up the next day, it was completely fine. And like 3 days later, I was talking to Mom, and she said the exact same thing happened at her house. Like she had heard a siren, it went off, she got up and was like really groggy and went to like go figure out what was going on, and then it just stopped. She's like, oh, that was weird, and went back to bed. So I don't know, maybe it's like poltergeist or something weird happening, but it was just something that was so bizarre that I had never experienced in my life before. And my mom has seen several UFO in her lifetime, so she's always had weird experiences happen to her. So I don't know, it was just weird, and to have like a hyperdimensional phenomenon like that was like a siren was kind of spooky. But
well, it could have been a little shift into a hyperdimensional space. I mean, this weird stuff happens, I'm telling you. You know, why people don't realize that we live in such a really weird reality, because all of the weird stuff that does happen, and they just shove it under the rug, you know, and do it all their lives. I mean, it's really an amazing reality. It's furiously interesting. People just, you know, float away. So, but anyway, are you going to talk about the ancient aliens again?
Yes, I'm gonna ask 2 questions real quick about that. So part one, and again, I'll post the Cassiopaea and Substack when I'm going to ask this question to Harrison, and obviously you guys can all chime in. But the last 3 articles have been amazing. Again, it's all been about ancient aliens. The second one was about the temples. You know, like I don't know why Angkor Wat keeps popping in my head, but there's a bunch of temples in Asia that were serpentine and had all sorts of things. And I've been, by the way, to many of these. And I've seen these and I've walked through them and I have taken pictures and videos, and they're all pretty much, I mean, astonishing. I mean, when you see what's going on. So I guess if the Seas have told you, Laura, in sessions going back into the 90s, that they were built in homage to the lizard beings. And again, when you see these giant like cobra deities, you know, fish type people or beings that kind of look like hominid in portions, but reptilian face, or even like fish like mermaid like bottoms. The question that I have, again, I'm going to go to you first, Harrison, is like the Seas said that these were built in homage to the lizard beings who were the quote unquote gods of this time and age. And again, we really have no way to date any of this. I mean, obviously we can go by what the Seas say, hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps, but, or maybe 15, 20,000 years, whatever, but, you know, pre-Atlantis, after Lemuria. But if they built these temples in homage to the lizard beings, but the lizard beings weren't actually here because they were 4th density, what was actually happening? Like what kind of technology was being used, or were they guiding them from 4th density to 3rd density to build these temples?
Well, a handful of the temples that we covered in that second article,
yeah,
they actually said that those were from a time. This would have been like early Bronze Age and before,
right?
So like 5 or 4,000 years plus, years ago. That like Angkor Wat or what were the other ones? I think was Tiwanaku.
Yeah.
And
then the one in Bolivia, the one that I visited in Bolivia. What was that one called?
That's Tiwanaku.
Oh, Tiwanaku. What's the one in Mexico? Yeah. Tiahuacan or Tiahuaco or whatever.
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan. I can't ever pronounce that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I've been to. Is Teotihuacan.
Yeah,
that was
that
awesome.
One, dude, it's amazing. Literally amazing. Yeah.
But anyways, they're saying that like Angkor Wat in particular, but like a few of these were built directly by reptilians.
Right.
So this was at a time when reptilians had the capability of like manifesting at least for a substantial period of time within our reality, so that they could actually come into the temple and be worshipped directly, whatever that means.
Right.
And so otherwise, like if we ignore that time period and just look at whatever, like the cultures after that, and so this would have been like maybe the Aztecs and some of the archaic civilizations like post early Bronze Age, even up to like almost contemporary times, like Hawaii before it was before the Western European powers kind of discovered it. Like those kinds of cultures, their interactions were probably like what you were hinting at, as that's more of just a strictly indirect influence. Well, just like everyone, all of the civilizations today, right? It would be on par with that. Is that there's not necessarily any more direct interaction than like you would get with an abduction, let's say. But other than that, it's all kind of influence and like subtle influence, like Matrix style. But back several thousand years ago, it's like what was that one quote that the sea said? It's like, imagine being in the jungle 7,000 years ago, right, and some reptilian shows up and teaches you astrophysics, right? You're going to worship that guy. So they were essentially saying that's probably what happened, that did happen in various places and several thousands years ago.
You want to add anything to that, Laura?
Well, I just want to say that I think the environment of our planet, the vibrational environment, the atmospheric, gravitational, electromagnetic, I think these kinds of things have changed from time to time, and depending upon what a particular environment is, it might make it easier or more difficult for those kinds of transitions between densities to take place. And that's something we don't know a lot about. The seas did say something about how dramatically things changed after the collapse of the Roman Empire. And that was accompanied by some pretty horrendous cometary activity, as far as we can tell. And I had been working on a piece of work, which I'm going to bring it out in the not too distant future, where I'd been tracking all the mentions in the ancient records of any kind of weather, atmospheric, or geological phenomena that the ancient chroniclers named or mentioned. And there was certainly an extraordinary amount of electrical activity that was going on, even compared to today, to the extent that, you thought, what the heck was going on? There were a lot fewer people than there are now. We're talking about a fairly proscribed region, and yet all of this stuff is happening. And even today, you don't have that much of that stuff happening when you have global awareness, what's going on all over the globe, and people have got cameras and they're watching everything and they're filming everything, and it still wasn't the same amount of stuff that was going on back then. So it was clearly kind of a rather different environment, electrically speaking, at the very least. So you just have to keep those kind of things in mind. And that was another thing. I mean, Harrison mentioned it, I think, in his most recent article about the Roman shoes that were like gigantic,
Right.
size what, 15 or 13 or 15?
14.
Size 14 shoes, and they were, they found what, 8 pairs of them, and presumably they did not all belong to the same person. So there were some pretty big guys around then. So
Well,
I don't know. It's just such a one. I wish people would read things like Charles Fort, and I read these collections of information that are gleaned from newspapers and legitimate sources, because they're so fascinating. You would never believe that our reality was so interesting, from all the people that lived in the cities with their faces stuck in their phones, and look around and don't know what the heck is going on. So, yeah.
So speaking of that, or to transition from that with the Kandahar Giant, I am friends with somebody who knows somebody was in that battle. And this person, I mean, dude, he would never admit it to you. I mean, I could text him and ask him, but he told me, I want to say he's special forces. I helped him with his testosterone back in like 2014 or 2013. And then he started seeing that I was like into esoteric lore and stuff. And one day he texted me and he said, I got to tell you something. I was like, all right, bro, what is it? And he said, do you remember this? And then he sent me a link to like Steve Quayle's stuff, because this was circulating back in like 16 or 17. And I was like, yeah, I'm familiar with the giant, red-haired giant that was supposedly killed by the military during the Taliban stuff going on. And he's like, well, I was there. And I was like, what? And this was not a guy, by the way, who would ever like make up shit to me. He was like very serious, like ex-special forces. He's out of the military now, and he's involved in like security consulting and stuff. And I helped him with his hormones for like a year, but he was like, I saw it. He said, I'll just like, hopefully he's not watching this and listening to this, because I don't want to betray his confidence, but like he told me that he watched it take on automatic weapon fire, and what else was it? I think somebody launched like a Ricolius rifle at it, and he said that the giant grabbed the missile with his hand and like literally tossed it back at them before it blew up. And he said that the whole entire time that he was fighting this being, he felt like he was in some sort of like a holographic reality, and that it was like he was dreaming it at the same time. He's like, I don't really know how to describe it. He says, our forward command told us that if any of us were to ever say any of this to the media, that we would be disgraced and dishonorably discharged, and that we were not to talk about any of this. And I don't even know if he's ever really told a lot of people. Obviously, I'm not saying who this person is, but it was very, very bizarre when he told me the story. And honestly, I believe him. I believe him 100%. This was not a person that would be like making up a story to me.
Is there a link to something about this that I could see?
Yeah. If you search on YouTube, there's a bunch of videos about it.
Well, I've got it in the intro to the last article, Laura. At the end of the introductory section, when I talk about you write about the Kandahar Giant, I've got links to, I think all of the main sources. So first it was Stephen Quayle. He and Tim Alberino did a documentary like 10 plus years ago where they interviewed the pilot.
Yes.
Who said that he was the one that flew the body of the Kandahar Giant from Bagram Air Force Base to Qatar. And then L.A. Marzulli interviewed, this was several years later, he interviewed 2 people. And so I've got links to the interviews. He interviewed 2 more people, one of whom claimed to be in the team that killed the giant, and another that was just in the military at the time and that just said, yeah, like everyone knows this story. Like it was going around like special forces circles that, everyone was talking about it. So he heard it secondhand while he was overseas. And then Tim Alberino, who did the first interview along with Stephen Quayle, he tweeted about it just in the last couple of years a few times. And I've got the quote of one of his tweets. So he said, yeah, it's 100% legit. He believes the people he talked to, and that he's had multiple sources in the military, like in special forces, kind of like the Jay's guy, that have told him, yeah, it happened,
Well, so the one of the
well, I guess we can tell the story a bit for those that haven't heard it. So the story is that the pilot says this happened in 2005, and the guy that spoke with L.A. Marzulli said it happened in 2002. So either one of them is wrong, one of them's like, or the second guy's, making it up, or there could have been two events, because like Tim Alberino says,
right.
if there was one giant, chances are there was more than one.
Right.
This guy. So the story is that there were reports there were some villagers in Afghanistan that were doing some shady stuff. Like they were going out into the mountains, and the Americans were convinced that they were giving aid to the Taliban. But at the same time, there was chatter or stuff from the locals saying rumors about cannibalistic giants living in the caves. And so the military sent out like a team of special forces to basically check out this cave, expecting to find the Taliban, that these locals were bringing food to the Taliban. Well, they were bringing food to this giant. So out of this cave comes this 12 to 14 foot tall, pale, red-haired guy with basically like it was described as having like kind of almost like canvas wrapped around his feet for shoes, and maybe just like an animal pelt, covering his crotch. And he allegedly killed this entire team of special forces, however many there were. So they sent a second team to basically find out what happened. And this second team found the giant eating the remains of the original team. And then that's when they all were firing at him. They eventually killed him. I think that one of the soldiers allegedly said like shoot him in the head. So they all started shooting him in the head, and that's what killed him.
Yeah.
They attached him to the helicopter, took him to Bagram Air Force Base. The pilot then says that he was a C-130 pilot. So he was called in, and as soon as he got there, there were men in suits and told him, so we've got a very high value payload today. You're not allowed to talk about it. No photographs. It never happened. Don't talk about it to anyone. And so he looks, and on this giant pallet, these pallets are designed to hold 1,500 pounds worth of load. And when they weighed this pallet, it was 1,100 pounds. And he described it. It was this giant human figure, like curled up, like in a fetal position, and sticking out were its giant feet, that were like, I don't know, 40 inches or something. And he looked at it. It had 6 digits on each on its feet and on its hands, and red-haired, pale skin. He said it looked like almost like, what's the word, like cyanotic, like almost like pale blue. He wasn't sure if that's because it was dead, or if that was its natural skin color, and that it just reeked. He said it was the worst smell, basically a Bigfoot smell. Like someone who hasn't like a creature, like a human creature that hasn't bathed in 50 years or something. And so it was just it just reeked. So he flew it to Qatar, the base in Qatar, and then through the grapevine just heard the rumors that it was then flown from Qatar to Wright-Patterson.
Where
that's the story. Yeah,
probably.
Wow.
Yeah. So my guy's story was almost verbatim, except that he told me that this thing took on more firepower, and so back to what you were saying, Harrison, that like until they shot him in the head, they couldn't believe what this thing was taking on. That's what his explanation to me was, that it was so mind blowing. And he was like, that's why I felt like I was in like an altered reality, because there's no way that a living tissue based organism like us could take on that kind of firepower and stand up. Like, it was like, he says it was like, it wasn't even hurting him. And it wasn't until we hit him with, like, I think he told me it was like what is the giant? What is the big M gun? They took him out with like one of those giant headshot. What is those gun? What are those guns called? M15? I forget what it's called. But it can take down a rhinoceros. But they said they hit him like two or three shots to the head with that, and he finally felled him. But that he was like, it was the most unbelievable thing. Like, they were all in shock. And supposedly, according to him, he killed a couple other of that team too before they killed him. So that this thing was
that was in the in the story, the LA Marzulli one. The guy had said that that they, when they were engaged in it wasn't really, it was a one-sided firefight, but that the giant had a spear and basically speared one of the soldiers. It was like holding his body on the spear, and crazy
stuff.
I wonder, to the point we were talking about the Roman times, and Harrison, from your article, it almost makes it seem like it was like kind of commonplace for people at that time to experience giants just walking around, right? They were walking around, the little people. What's weird is, like, in our whitewashed history, we don't hear of anything like that they coincided at the same time. But I do wonder, like Laura was saying, we have Earth changes since that time that may make it less conducive or less favorable for them to exist. I do think it's interesting that the Kandahar Giant was in a cave. Was that cave connected to somewhere underground? To which, are there, like you said, if there's one, there's got to be more, right? Because how did they get there if there was one, unless they were just dropped off by a spaceship or something? I wonder, cave, underground, is there a portal there in Afghanistan? Also, it's very interesting too, in light of the U.S. being in Afghanistan for how many years? 2001 to what? Like, was it 2019 or 2020? What the deal is with that being in Afghanistan? Again, I'm sure there's like geopolitical stuff, but hey, like, hyperdimensionally speaking, what was the reason with that? And was there stuff underground? I don't know. It's just,
there's all kinds. Well, I've never looked into this too deeply, but there's all kinds of rumors about Iraq too.
That's what I was just going to say about the invasion.
There was
of Iraq.
Some weird reasons for going into Iraq, like, recovering some ancient, like, Babylonian artifacts, and like, there's some crazy stuff. Underground caves, like if what your guy Jay was saying about, like, kind of like the dreamlike quality, if there was something about that environment that something about the natural, just like this goes back to volume 1 of Beyond Disclosure, like window areas, like there are areas where weird stuff is concentrated, and like Laura was saying, it's like, so it's possible that there was
it's a bleed through,
strange bleed through result of the natural, like, geomagnetic features of some area in Afghanistan, maybe, that made it conducive for why this giant and presumably its relatives were able to survive for so long. And one aspect of the story that I didn't really expand on was that the locals had been bringing offerings, to this being.
Right.
So like, that's why they went out. That's why they thought it was the Taliban, because this was a long-standing practice of the locals to essentially bring, like, I don't know if it was goats or whatever, to feed this being, so that they kind of revered it or venerated it, as Alberino put it. So yeah, something weird going on in the in the mountains of Hicksville, Afghanistan.
So Laura, here's a question for you, and we can end the show on this note, I think. Depending on how much longer you guys want to go. I know it's getting late over there for you, but so how do the fourth density consortium, which we know is made up of Nordics, lizard beings, grays, whatever else, sectoids, whatever, like, how are they, assuming that they are still calling the shots here hyperdimensionally, how do we think they're communicating with, let's say, the people? Again, I use that term loosely, undergrounders, whatever, whoever's truly running the show from third density in human form. How do they connect and communicate with them? Is it done through, channeling? Is it done through technology? Is it a combination of both? Do you think that now that AI is a bridge between these two levels of reality?
I think probably the main way that they communicate is through a selected agent that they have kind of like a mind meld with. And then that selected agent, issues instructions. Now, under certain circumstances, they might get together and perform some rituals, and
Right.
and then the appearance of the hyperdimensional overlord would manifest and speak to his minions or whatever. But I mean, that's kind of the way it's always been, and
Right.
I don't think they would want to change that. Now, as for AI, I think AI is it's a little primitive compared to their own system, which is psychic and more than psychic, actually. So I think that AI would be rather primitive.
I'd just add that it's probably all of the above, but in different circumstances and different for different groups and different people, right? So because everything's compartmentalized and there are various layers, and so there are people that know certain things and don't know other things. So the people that, like, for the last 70+ years who have been dealing with like crash retrievals, there are reports going back as early as Roswell and before of live beings being recovered in these crash retrieval operations, and then interviews of and interrogations of these specimens, these beings that survived and that are in custody. And all the reports about those are that it's telepathic, that the alien and chooses, it can choose who it wants to talk to, and it'll speak to them directly, telepathically. So you've got that level of communication where someone is basically someone working for military and intelligence is having a one-on-one conversation with this captured alien in front of them. Of course, the people engaging in that kind of conversation, they're not read into anything by all accounts. They're just brought in for a job, often because they're the only one that can communicate in that way, because it's hit or miss whether someone will be able to communicate. So they don't necessarily know what's going on. They're just having a conversation and don't know whether to believe what the alien's saying. They might have questions that they're given to ask, whatever. Then there is like the Dan Sherman story, Above Black. A lot of people vouch for Dan Sherman's story, and the way he tells, and he seems like a very genuine guy. Like, sure. I tend to believe his story.
Yeah.
His story is that he was tasked in, like, I think the early 90s to take a training course, and eventually basically got co-opted into an NSA special access program, where he was trained through this, just like the way he describes it is, it's almost boring. It's almost boring the way he describes it. He describes going down into this like underground room under this like facility, and basically just engaging in this training on this computer, like looking at like little figures on the screen, and then trying with his mind to like make them match, or doing all kinds of things. And he wasn't sure if it was real or not, if they were like joking with him, but it was essentially a type of brain training that he found out was because he was part of this program, like since he was a child. He was kind of like pre-chosen. He was told that his mother was abducted while she was pregnant with him, and that there were changes done to his DNA to facilitate this, and it was part of a U.S. government program in collaboration with aliens. That's what he was told. He doesn't know if that's true, but he did all this training in order to become a psychic like communicator. And while working on this special access program, his job was to basically sit in a mini skiff, like a tractor trailer kind of environment where they have all these electronics. And his job was to basically, sit there, and when he got a signal, he would get just a string of digits, like 0, 1, 1, 1, 7. Yeah. And then, so he'd just write it down into his secret program, close it. And then eventually he realized that he could actually engage in a conversation. And he ended up finding a way to quit the program because he eventually started getting intelligible sequences of numbers and words that were basically dates, locations, and like identifiers of people who the way that the string of digits was would come through was that he was getting details of abductions. On this day, this person was abducted at these coordinates, and then it gave a series, like just a series of parameters like pain and memory loss or something. And so he was like, what the hell is going on? Like this is happening and we know about it. And so he basically engineered himself to be dishonorably discharged so that he could get out of this special access program because they told him he was in it for life. But anyways, that's another level of communication where apparently there are at least programs where people are trained to their belief. They are convinced, whether it's reality or some really weird big con on these servicemen, to believe that they are in contact, and receiving messages from, in this case, it was Greys that he believed that he was in contact with. There's that. And then, so there would be what Laura's talking about, where, there's the underground bases, of course, where apparently various species are interacting with various humans, like one-on-one directly, or as groups. So there can be direct communication that way. And of course, there's channeling too. I'm sure that there are psychics and channel. Well, I guess Dan Sherman was kind of like, it wasn't really channeling, but similar. But there's probably that going on too. And then there's the surveillance, because there was this one session a few years ago where the Seas basically said that these military intelligence people are working on AI because they want to be able to the alien language that they hear, because they're not sure if when they talk to the aliens, if they're telling the truth, so they want to spy. So there's all kinds of weird layers and stuff that could be going on. And so it's probably like whatever you can imagine, there's probably something like that happening on some level and in some faction.
Yeah. We're screwed.
I was about to say, bonus question before we sign off. Are we all of the same feeling that we're getting closer to the wave hitting full force?
Yeah, I think it's things are happening. Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah, we're getting ready for something.
Yeah, hard.
I would just
hard to
say
go
it seems that the rate of change is picking up exponentially to something, whether that's a cometary event, like a planetary comet event, a political, geopolitical, social event. It just feels weird is all I can say. Like it just feels weird. So I don't know, but
the whole reality is acting weird right now. I mean, it's crazy.
It's harder and harder to sleep. I think the more intuitive and awake and insensitive you are to the planet's energy forces, I think it's getting harder and harder to sleep at night. Like I sleep like in bursts. And it's just like sometimes I'll wake up, or Monica will wake up and we'll look at each other and like, what is going on? But yeah, this planet is definitely, you could say it's past its sell-by date.
Yeah. So we're gonna be seeing things happening. So I think people ought to keep their eyes to the skies, to the land, to the society. Just pay attention to everything, because you never know when something is going to come along that's going to trigger you to know that you need to do something. Yeah. And the only thing to do, and I noticed this lodestone here on the chat said exactly the same thing I thought when Harrison was talking about the Afghanis taking the food to the giant. That they venerated him, and I was thinking maybe they're just feeding him so he won't eat them.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, because they told the Americans that they were cannibalistic. So yeah, they knew that these guys ate humans. So
yeah, let's keep them fed. And I mean, there are stories in Native American legends about cannibalistic giants, and they had to feed them to keep them from, coming and eating them. So this world is just a lot weirder than even we can imagine.
It really is. But thankfully, shows like this, Laura's work, Harrison's work, are bringing more of this information to, in my opinion, the masses and to people who are, at least receptive to the message. And that's what I'm seeing. And, whether X is part of that or not, I mean, I feel like X is getting worse, as you said, Laura, but there is glimpses, of information that are being put out there now. So, I mean, again, it just comes down to the person, like you have the great quote of, you can't wake people up who are not ready. You have to meet people where they are, but at least we're putting out enough information, I think, into call it the ethos or the ether, that puts this kind of information front and center. And it's, obviously fact-based, science-backed, historically backed. There's a lot of information that, can validate a lot of this stuff. So, I mean, I think it comes down to the end user. If you're watching this and you find value in this, please share it. Share it to your network, because as the season told us, right? Knowledge protects, ignorance endangers. Share it with your network. Yep.
And on that note, I think we've covered the topic.
We have. You guys all have an amazing night. For Jay Campbell, Laura, Knight-Jadczyk, Harrison Koehli, and Hunter Williams. We'll see you guys on episode 12, whenever that comes. Peace.